All right, this video is going to cover the SLP token indexer, specifically this G2, which is generation 2. It's got some scaling features the previous SLP indexers did not have. So today I'm going to show you how to install the Docker container for this SLP token indexer and how to start it syncing from SLP Genesis. So, in order to install the SLP indexer, you're going to need a fully synced Bitcoin Cash full node. And I covered that in a previous video here at cachestack.info. There's a video here on how to set up your Bitcoin Cash full node and how to start it from syncing. So here I'm logged into my cache box and I can see that I have my Bitcoin Cash full node, and I also have Fulcrum indexer running, which I covered in a previous video. That's not needed, but these three pieces of software, the full node, the Fulcrum indexer, and the SLP indexer, they're the core of the cache stack infrastructure. So if I take a peek at the logs for my full node, I can see it's fully synced. The progress says 1.0. That's how I know it's fully synced at a current block height of 937,465. So to start with, so I'm in my cache box and I've got Fulcrum and BCHN on an otherwise empty directory. So I'm going to, there's two repositories worth noting. There's PSF SLPDB. This is going to be used, but we're not going to use this repository directly. We're going to use it indirectly by cloning the PSF SLP indexer -G2 or generation 2. So I'll start by cloning that and then go into that directory. And we're going to do the production version. That everything in the Docker container is considered production version, and then the dev version is running locally. There's a Docker folder inside production, and there's these three folders: block index, SLPDB, and TX indexer. So when this starts, there's going to be three Docker containers that open up. And the reason is that SLPDB is the database. It's a level DB database with a REST API. And then these other two processes, the block indexer and the transaction indexer, they talk to it over the REST API. And this architecture is different than in the past. What this allows you to do is index blocks separately from transactions. There was an issue in the past when a big block would come through in Bitcoin Cash. Because JavaScript is single-threaded, the indexer would sort of get blocked by trying to process the big block, and it would stop processing real-time transactions. This architecture fixes that issue. Blocks and transactions can be processed in separate threads. So it's a big improvement to the user experience. Anyways, that's just a little aside. Each of these directories has a .env example or .env local file, and this controls the environment variables that you need to modify to work with your system. If you're using a cache box and you have followed the previous video on the full node, all these default values will work just fine for you. This is the default ports, the default login and password for the full node, and it's a Docker container, so that's the address for the Docker network in Linux. Um, so all you need to do is copy the local file to .env, and if you need to make any change, go ahead and edit that .env file, and then do the same thing for the other two containers. You need to do this before you build the Docker container so that it's expecting the file to be there, this .env file, in each of these three subdirectories. Okay, once that's done, you can just follow the rest of the README here. Under the production environment, we can go back to where this Docker YAML file is. We can build the container with Docker compose build. It'll probably take longer for you. I already had it pre-built, that's why it went so fast. And then I can bring it up with Docker compose up -D for daemon. That'll put it in the background. And then you can use the logs to review the SLP DB container. This one needs to come up first, and we can see that the other containers are talking to this container by seeing all the logs go up. So now that we know that that's running, which is managing the level database, we can check on the, well, right now, let's look at processes. So we have our full node, we have the 2 fulcrum indexer containers, and we have our 3 SLP token containers. So like I said, SLPDB is just a level database wrapped around a REST API. It manages the actual database, and then the block indexer and transaction indexer, they talk to the full node and then upload metadata to the level database. So if we look at the logs for the block indexer, we can see that it's happily indexing. When it comes up for the first time, it starts on block around 543,000. That's essentially SLP Genesis. So this is off and running, and we could just let this run and sync. There's a few things I want you to note. So there's the root production folder inside the Gen 2 repository. And then once you bring the containers up, there will be 2 folders, Docker and data. Data is where all the data is saved for the Docker containers. If you go in there, you'll see a level DB folder, and then in there, a current and a zips folder. So in the current folder, these are all the level databases. This is the live data that's being updated right now as it crawls all the blocks in the blockchain. And then as it progresses, every 1,000 blocks, it's going to create a zip file. We don't have one in here yet because it's still syncing, but every 1,000 blocks, it's going to create a backup zip file of the database, and that database will live here. And if there's an issue, it will roll back to these previously saved databases and resync to fix an issue. So I'm going to leave the video here. You're up and running, and the indexer is indexing. It's doing its thing. It will sync up into the tip of the chain from here, and the transaction indexer is not yet running. It only runs after this initial block download completes, and this might take a couple weeks to fully sync because JavaScript's a single-threaded programming language. So what I'm going to do is create a second video showing you how to download a pre-synced database to speed this process up. But if that's not available, you can do this and sync from Genesis the same way you would do a full node or a fulcrum indexer without any third-party reliance.